Hello, folks. Jeremy Bruce here with Saga Media, and I am with Adam Connor of Authentic Avenue.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is Authentic Avenue and what do you do?
Okay, what I do is I build content engines for businesses. That is the long and the short of it. By the way, hello viewers. Hello viewers. What's up? Hopefully we meet at some point. I got into that several years ago, mostly through podcasts, but over the last year or two have transitioned to video. Just like this, kind of. This is really nice. This is really fancy. But I've been doing that. Yeah. That's what Authentic Avenue is. I think content's the most authentic avenue to building relationships, at least in business today. And so I'm out on a mission to make sure everybody can build it for them.
Absolutely. How did you get started? Like, what drove you to this path here and doing content and media and everything in between?
The path to doing content was different from the path to doing Authentic Avenue. So I'll start with the content. Basically, it was ego driven. From childhood, I was into performance, public speaking. I did public speaking competitively from the age of 11 to 18. I wanted to be in front of people. I wanted that audience. I crave that audience even today, even to this very minute. So I knew I wanted to do content for a long time. I didn't know exactly how. But in 2016, 2017, I got my first little crack at it, which was to do podcasts, simply audio. I was a traveling salesman. I was doing tech sales. And I thought the best way to have conversations with people I found impressive was simply to give them a platform to speak like I would want. So I said, hey, I'm an interviewer. I'm putting together this podcast about people making entrepreneurial leaps. It was called To Dare is Human, sort of a play on To Err is Human, only done intentionally. And mostly interviewed people who were my classmates, people who had graduated from Harvard with me, but had gone on to found great businesses and had made the 30 under 30 list, which is at the time something that was glorified in my mind. And so that was the way that the content began. The fuel for performance, all that was there, but operationalizing it into something that was tangible, people could see, was that. Authentic Avenue, a little bit different because I began doing those podcasts for another business. And then in 2020, that business, that startup I was working for, closed. And so just like a lot of businesses in 2020, it left people reeling and wondering what to do. And so I said I could either go and build this for another business, go get a job. I could stand in the most qualified unemployment line that we'd had in the last 20 years, or I could roll the dice. I could see if this is something that I could build at scale, a discipline that I could instill and install in other businesses. So that's what Authentic Avenue became. And so today, it's a little bit of podcast, it's more and more video, but I'm using that same fuel for performance and the need to give others an audience that has created the business.
So you mentioned Harvard.
Yeah.
You went to Harvard.
I did.
And so when I think of Harvard, because I'm in the financial business and private equity and whatnot,
Right.
and that's really what comes to mind with Harvard and whatnot, to me anyway. Is there a big kind of emphasis on media or content creation specifically at Harvard? Is there a branch to that? Because it's just not something I've ever looked at. When I think of Harvard, I think of, a Harvard financial, guy or girl, coming out looking to join an investment firm.
You're right.
Is that?
I mean, that's mostly
okay.
what it is. My context is I graduated in 2014. So I can give
Okay.
you all of my understanding up until then.
Yes.
And since then, Harvard has done things like they've added theater majors, and it's much more
Awesome.
performance-based, and content can be a part of that. The most that Harvard had at the time was essentially a film major, which they called VES, Visual Environmental Studies. I did not do that. I got a degree in economics, like most people who would
Yeah.
go into the finance world, because the truth is the majority of people that came out in 2014 were either going into iBanking, or they were going into management consulting, or they were going into tech, or they had founded something. And so, or they were going into government, because the two most common majors were economics and government. And that's what most people did. A 2014 grad going into tech sales was like, why'd you go to Harvard then? Because you could learn those skills pretty much anywhere. Matter of fact, I didn't even learn those skills in the classroom. I learned those skills at the school newspaper selling eighth page ads to pizza shops. So I just enjoyed doing that more than learning economic models, which of course I picked up a little bit of knowledge on, and it gave me a rough business sense of, okay, what is supply, what is demand, how do you price? But I truly instead enjoyed being on that stage, having that audience.
Yes.
Even having that audience of one, the pizza shop owner on the phone. I just learned that I could take that performance and translate it into dollars in my pocket, and that's what I decided to do. Not common for a Harvard grad. I gave a speech at Harvard graduation during Harvard graduation week, And I titled it, How I Successfully Failed Harvard. My first two words in the speech were, I failed. And the reason I did that was for a couple of reasons, but mostly is because I wasn't coming out kind of looking like your, brushed up Harvard grad ready to kick down the door of Bain
Yes.
and then go on to make the 30 under 30 and all that. So that was my rough experience. I didn't have nearly as much enjoyment in the classroom as I did doing everything outside of it.
And you also mentioned public speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And that I think can go into play with a lot of things, especially with trying to be on front of a camera or speaking to an audience.
Yep.
What was it like the first time you ever got in front of a big audience? Were you always comfortable, or was it something where, because I know what it's like to speak in front of people, and and it could be nerve-wracking at times, especially at the beginning.
It can.
When you first do it. So what was that like, and where was your first, or what was your one that stood out at the beginning?
Gosh, that is a great question that nobody's asked before. And by the way, for viewers, if you have a child or you're between 15 and 18, you're in high school, do speech and debate, because that's
Absolutely.
a great way to just get out there. It's super low stakes. Most of the time you're competing against your classmates or people at the school down the road. Really good way to step into this, very low stakes. Once again, my first experience was at the age of 11, and I was part of a class competition to write a speech about thinking, working, and expecting the best. This was part of Optimist International, which is a much larger organization. But the way that they help to instill the values in young children is to have them write speeches, motivational speeches, things like that. And it started out to get a good grade in English class. And the first speech I ever made was after having written the first draft of it, standing in front of a class of roughly 19 kids and the teacher and presenting. And the teacher had said, after the class, I was like, wow, that was really great. And so I was like, okay, well, there's a school competition that was all the winners from the different classes. There were 6 different classes in the middle school that I was in that would come together and present in front of the school or in front of the middle school. Much bigger audience to me. Goes from 20 to 100, 120 plus all the teachers. So those first experiences going home, I would drill every single night from pretty much after dinner. So let's call it 6 o'clock or something until roughly 8 or 8:30. Because I went to bed around 8:30, 9 o'clock in those years. And my mother would drill me on the speech every single night. And so by the time that I got in front of the class of 100 people, which would be nerve-wracking for any 11-year-old, I was totally cool because I knew down to the second how long that speech was. I knew exactly when to walk. I knew exactly how to gesture. I knew exactly how to inflect. And that paid off because the school competition I ended up winning. Then I went against the winners of some other schools and won that. Then I went against some winners of some other zones and won that. And then I went down to Ocean City, Maryland, because I'm from Baltimore, and that's where the big statewide competition was. Again, age of 11. And that was probably in front of let's call it 500 people. And I won that one. And so that snowball, which all happened in 6th grade, was okay, wow. I got something here. I know how to do it. But I really wasn't terribly nervous from the beginning because I was more nervous to screw up a step or a gesture or a word at home drilling.
Sure.
I didn't want to screw that up.
So that's a good thing you bring up then is the practice at home, but also, what would be your advice then on the kid goes up his first or second time, whatever, and they get, you freeze. You see that in the movies, kind of comedy skits, or they froze and they don't want to speak anymore. And what is your advice on a pause or a mess up during your speech that might, they call it brain farts, you
Sure.
forget, you pause, you forget what your next line is. What would be just basic advice on how to keep rolling through that? I always tell everybody just to breathe.
Yeah.
Just get some deep breath in and slow breath out. And even if you forget the next line, try to think of where you were and kind of roll with that. That's something that worked for me personally.
Right. That's the first instinct that comes to my mind, tactically. And there's differences between giving a speech and performing a play or something like that. But in both cases, I think generally the first thing to do is to, first of all, close your eyes a little bit because people tend to get really wide-eyed and their face tends to take in a lot more light because they open it up like this. And people can kind of see that you are mentally frozen because your face is frozen. So as much as you can, just try to relax your facial muscles. And then, I don't know if it's a breath in and out, but it's at least just maybe a soft smile,
Yes.
And then go back to the last couple words that you said and recollect your thoughts and move on. Especially for me at the age of 11, I know that I had 1 or 2 of those probably in a competition, but people are accepting of that because we're all human. Nobody's expecting you to go up and be this robot. And then in plays and things like that, it's similar, and you have other character quirks and traits you've probably developed that you can do to
Like
play
scanning
off.
the crowd, things like that, just some hand gestures.
Interact with the environment that you're
Sure.
in, whatever. But
Movement.
first, exactly.
So you're not standing still, like you said. And do you feel too, the earlier a younger child or even teenager gets started, that taking that step and getting past that fear of maybe getting in front and then starting to speak in front of crowds, do you feel that can change the whole trajectory of their path in life with professionalism, confidence into adulthood? Because you notice that shy humans that don't go into speaking, have never done it before, tend to take jobs. It just seems like my experience, they're usually like the administrative assistant. They don't want to, and I get it, it's not for everybody,
Right,
but
sure.
it is something that, and what your opinion would be, mine would be, if they can get started on speaking in front of people, it's a confidence builder in life. And if you screw up, that's how you learn. But it also, I mean, public speaking, that's something I wish I would have done at an earlier age, because I would probably be more polished as an adult.
It's like money in the bank, man.
Yeah.
Builds over time, compounding interest in everything, in the money in your account, the content that you end up building, and every skill that you have from an early age. And Uncle Sam ain't coming for that.
No.
So when I started at 11, it was something that was brand new to me. Of course, I was a little flustered at first because I'd never done it before. But I drilled so hard, even in that first spring of, I don't know what year it was, 2004, 2005, that by the time I got in front of the crowd, like, they were secondary. It was just hitting my marks more than anything. And if people drill that, they don't have to, it doesn't have to be like a Venus Serena Williams getting drilled every single day, like, practicing like Kobe, it doesn't have to be like that. But getting out of your own head, the easiest way to do that is incredible practice, incredibly early. And by the time, it doesn't take that long, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, you are into it. And just like anybody,
flows.
start young, start early, be intense about it, and it pays off.
Now, content, because you mentioned content, and you mentioned why you got into content, but 2016, correct?
Correct.
Now that we're starting to see that more, do you feel that the momentum of alternative content, alternative media is going to continually grow? Because I feel we're only in like almost like a web 2.0 type of scenario where it's just entering in.
Yep.
Just because, my personal opinion is that just mainstream way of content from a handful of media, it was always seemed to be the stale and the same.
Yeah, because there's only 3 channels on television.
Yeah, I mean, you turn on the news and what do you hear? You hear the first 10 minutes about all the bad things that happen, where now you're getting really good aspects. But where do you feel the shift happened, in content, and where do you feel it's going to move in the future with technology, now AI, all those things? Like, do you feel that there was a time frame over the course of the last couple decades that really, other than just technology and YouTube and things like that?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, those could have been invented and people could have just not really been interested. But there was a shift where people saw value in this.
Yep.
And so, what is your opinion on why that is and why that changed, and also where it might be going from present day?
I'll say people crave validation. Everybody wants to be admired, accepted, valued in their own way. The birth of social media between 2004 and 2010 all of a sudden gave everybody a platform. Everybody could be valued at scale. And so people decided to start contributing, get involved. They felt like they were the newscaster. Again, there was no longer those 3 TV channels that their parents had talked about when TV was black and white. And so obviously that was the first era of change. For me personally, the next wave that I noticed, which took content beyond just putting a video on the internet, was when I got started, 2016, 2017, 2018, seeing in the podcast world, which had existed for 15 years but had not gotten mega popular until then, became a way that people could become their own late night talk show host almost. And that only proliferated with people doing it on YouTube, with Spotify coming in and dropping $100 million on Joe Rogan. Everybody thinks about, that and Serial, which was this like murder podcast basically. And as soon as people saw that, hey, anybody can do this, with the caveat is that you need a bunch of
Sure.
cool equipment and you need a good story. You might not be saying, here's the 10 things that happened bad in the city, but you still need the hook. You still need people to keep watching for a reason. So
Yep.
the human nature hasn't changed. The way that traditional media and new media continues to hook audiences is roughly the same emotionally, but it's just the democratization of equipment, of the ability to publish and getting that audience and having that validation. So those two moments, I think, of the big checks being drawn in the last like 5 or so years. Obviously, COVID helped with that because then everybody was home and everybody had access to more creative time than they otherwise knew what to do with. And then, of course, social having been there 10, 15 years prior set the foundation for that. As far as Web 2.0 versus Web 3.0, I don't know. I'm not an expert there. I would say that the idea of creators and people building their own communities, their own niches, and monetizing them is still relatively new for the individual. When the internet was invented, all of a sudden you could build a website and capture people of a certain interest group into your internet digital home. These days, it's just somebody posts videos on their own individual channel on that website. And so the blocks get smaller and smaller, but the objectives are still the same. The nature is still the same.
Well, and on that subject, to a different manner, you expressed about more people getting involved. Everybody can do it. The way that technology's kind of rolling, do you think it's going to get even easier to make content? Because one of the things, I mean, we see like TikTok and people can edit videos from there, but if you really want to edit, though, it's still a pretty big challenge.
Yep.
Do you see with technology, one day a cell phone can really cut a 5-minute video or whatnot and look like you were in a studio? I mean, I know we're close, but being involved in this and having to use real experts, it's challenging to try to cut and edit a good video. I mean, there's guys I follow in financing that they literally put a camera in front and there's a whiteboard and they have good content and a lot of followers. But the quality's not there. They're never going to put in a good, like, coming in and out edit type. You're going to see, camera views and angles. I mean, I do drone photography too, and that's still a so you see the guys who do that and people really enjoy that, but that takes a really long time to put together. And I'm curious if the guy that just does the whiteboard, finance type of video where it's, one light and a camera, and if theirs is going to ever get to a quality where it's that simple to do on an editing, because it is challenging. I mean, that might be something where as this grows out, and this is kind of taken off of a question I'm going to have later down the road, is it sometimes can discourage people.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're really trying to put together a quality looking video. I guess my question is, do you feel that at some point cell phones maybe, or there's going to be a really easy to use camera or software that isn't, I have to edit and figure out 20 different things. It's really just plug and play with a basic, that's where I think it could start to go. And I think with the whole, I don't know if Chat GPT or this AI stuff's going to really, it seems to be helping with other things and kids writing essays and whatnot. But, do you see that if that ever can be a possibility in, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it's possible. In the case of the whiteboard financier, I think they would sooner find value from their audience in the content they currently give, which would allow them to invest in an expert. Shout out to Al, by the way. He's doing this video. It's pretty good. To find their Al before they would find an AI. And so the power of ChatGPT and AI with regards to content today is in the first couple of steps. Those first couple of steps, whether it's in pre-production, production, or post-production, are just organizing things. Organizing ideas, which can be concisely written, and ChatGPT, yes, is a great text-based way to do that. In the production phase, having tracks immediately line up with each other and things like that, so that when you go into Premiere, you don't have to do that manually. That's not really AI driven. I mean, these pieces of software know how to do this already. In the post-production, specifically with regard to repurposing, which is where I've seen AI take a lot of the work, the initial work, away from creators, that's a really great first step. And I think in 5 years, there will be a tool which I could dump a video in, assuming I've set it up right, and pull out 10 incredibly viral clips. And there are plenty of startups that claim to do this today. But there are a few problems with AI right now that means that those are like 6 out of 10 solutions. Namely, AI doesn't have a sense of humor. Yes. AI doesn't have timing like a human. It may, as the data that gets fed into it increases exponentially. But right now, a lot of times it will get you 60, 70% of the way there. And then you still need to tweak to make sure that everything is as slick as it can be. It'll throw captions on there. It'll give you nice colors. It may even give you a hook. But there's a lot more than that that creates a consummate killer piece of content. So AI is fantastic. It absolutely will. I think 5-10 years, probably pretty good, because those tools that I just referenced are less than a year old. And that will only increase and accelerate in time the innovation. It will reduce that barrier for a creator that looks up at a show like this and says, well, I don't have those fancy cameras. I don't have those lights. They'll probably still need to invest in those things because AI and those tech tools can only manipulate what they're given. And so the input source is extraordinarily important and probably where that investment is needed no matter what, similar to the practice that I put in when I was 11 to giving those speeches. But at the end of the day, you know, the software will massively help on the post-production side. I predict. I don't, it's not even a prediction, it's a fact.
Sure. Now in regards to content, and we spoke about content creators now are growing pretty rapidly. And so now it's very, I mean, it's a competitive market. And so how do you stand out is always like the question, what is my niche market? It's not as broad anymore. What would be your opinion on somebody coming up, a younger kid or somebody, even, you know, a middle-aged man or woman who just said, I don't want to do my regular job. This is where I want to do this. I watch this all day long. I believe I can bring something to the table with this subject matter or that. Content, it can get stale. So, you know, what is just some basic advice as to how to get started with content and how to potentially keep it going once you're to that phase one? And maybe,
It's all right here.
Yeah.
I could niche down all day. People who are into business interviews, that's pretty broad, but I could break that down in the Pittsburgh area with this particular sub-industry, with this particular type of executive. You know, I could do that and I could become important or known because I've been specific, but that still doesn't give people a reason to continue watching. That means that, oh, I've cornered that particular market. But you got to come into this with like energy and enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
And like, even if you don't have the most original idea in the world, like people are magnetized to people. And assuming that you can build in the correct hook and you build for clips and you have these segments that keep people wanting to watch, it's all about the person in the chair.
Yes.
Like I'll give you a great example. And it's one that I'm actively thinking out now. Like this is a concept that I have. It's in super pre-production. I don't really know where it's going to happen. But the broad case, the saturated market that exists is like, I want to sit down with cool people who have built cool businesses, right? That's what we're doing now. You have your own hook. I have my own hook, I think. But if I were to just go in and say, hey, top exec, hey, celebrity, hey, cool person, I want to interview and get your time. Well, you're not going to do that because the market is saturated for those sorts of things. They could just go on some major podcast with a bazillion listeners and get what they need out of it. But if instead I said, hey, I have a concept, and the concept is thought leaders, but leaders is spelled Liters. And I sit down and we have a drink, and I get the opinions of the top of the world from the bottom of a glass. Does that sound interesting to you? Like, maybe they would be interested in that. When Sean Evans launched Hot Ones, the idea was simple. Interview celebrities. It's been done all the time. But all of a sudden, he puts that shtick in front of him. The questions get hotter, the wings get hotter, and at the end, it reaches this fever pitch, maybe literally, where you just have to watch and you have to watch. It's magnetic.
Yes.
But it's all Sean. And of course, he researches like crazy. He's one of the best interviewers that I think I've seen. I think social media has seen since its advent. But it's because of him. Anybody else could go out there and say, I want to interview celebrities, but they're not going to have that. They're not going to have that shtick. That's really what, in this case, quite literally for him, the sauce of what makes a show great.
No pun intended.
Right. And I will say, that's not something that an AI tool is going to be able to provide. It might give you ideas from the beginning, but originality is also the other thing that AI doesn't have. It can bring together previously formed ideas and maybe make a hash of something new, but that is truly what people like. Something new, something fresh, something that they haven't seen. And if you could bring energy to it, then all the better.
So who else do you admire in the industry? Or maybe another way to pose this question is, if you had the chance or will have the chance to interview someone or a few people, who's on your Mount Rushmore list?
Great. I'm glad we went here.
Yes.
Also haven't been asked. This is great. You know what? Here's another thing, folks. If you're building a show like this, ask original questions.
Yes.
Go into their history, do whatever you need to do, but Mount Rushmore questions, list questions, those are awesome. Okay, Mount Rushmore of interviewers. You notwithstanding. So Sean Evans for me is on that list.
Yes.
Because he was able to take a YouTube show and create one of the most compelling, bite-sized, literally, celebrity interviews that we've ever seen. So I think he deserves a face up there. In terms of the ability to ask deep questions that confuse, surprise, and make the interviewees think, Nardwuar.
Yeah.
He has got the deepest research. I don't even know how he does it. Nobody really knows how he does it, but that's the appeal. Because he shows up kind of looking like a clown a little bit, not like somebody all suited up ready for an interview, and will blow away anybody. Go on YouTube and look at Nardwuar interviewing Pharrell Williams for the first time. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Those two are there for sure. I think for raw volume and consistency of input, regardless of what you think about the content of the interview itself, from a structure standpoint, Joe Rogan probably has to be there because
I
he,
agree.
regardless of who he speaks to and regardless of the opinions and the ideas given on that show, was able to build something out in such a simple set over such a long period of time that $100 million check from Spotify was just as much about that built audience as it was about anything done in any individual show. Just as much about Elon smoking weed as it was about him doing it for 20 years.
He flows good too. I mean, it's a good casual conversation that never seems stale.
Yep.
That's why even when some of these people he gets some guests on that I've never even heard of, and they're not top flight boxers or celebrities or Elon Musk or rock stars or scientists, but they still seem to flow, and he really just has conversation, and the conversation still has good content though. It pulls you in. So he's on mine as well.
So that's 3, and the 4th no longer with us, but I think for somebody of his status and stature to make people feel completely comfortable on camera, which is a totally other beast, probably Larry King.
Yeah.
He was able to do it live in prime time with people who were at the top of their lives, sometimes people at the bottom or local bottom of their lives, and was able to create a story no matter what. And I, admire his professional style. I like the fact that he basically was kind of like the first video podcast because he had the big mic in front of him and all that. So those 4, I would say. And then, there are a ton of people who are young and upcoming that I think are great. I think, again, regardless of content, I think look at many of the talents coming out of Barstool. I think they have figured out how to do an interview panel show great. I think Alex Cooper is A1, fantastic. I think Caleb, I'm forgetting his last name, but doing Sunday Conversations, I think he is fantastic. Again, all about the either making people feel at ease on camera or asking these killer questions that confuse, surprise, and or delight.
Do you, one of my favorites, do you follow Valuetainment, PDB, no. Patrick David Bett?
I don't.
He's a rock star. And you could see his progression as it's skyrocketed over the years. Now he's an entrepreneur in the insurance business, and he's got a very large. I think he has like a couple 5 or 10,000 employees under, and he just kept growing that business. But he started, and if you look at his videos, even 5-6 years ago, he was interviewing pretty interesting people that were famous and whatnot, but it wasn't a large, like now he has his own building and studio. I mean, it's a real media channel company, and recently he became minority owner of the New York Yankees. So you can see where the progression has. He's one of my favorite as well, and it's very good content. I mean, it's all over the place, but it's good all over the place. He'll interview Antonio Brown, and it really didn't go it was a tough interview if you look it up. But then he gets on with he gets on with old former Italian mobsters. He did a whole series on it. Yeah, it's really good content, and I highly recommend anybody go look at Valuetainment. He actually just announced he got the VT.com. So one of the hardest things on when you're going out and getting your .com, .org.
Get something short.
Yeah,
and relevant.
It gets really, and that made me think. I'm like, I wonder how much X cost for Twitter. If VT cost like $3 or $4 million.
Probably.
So I mean, I'm in the middle of battling trying to get a name for one of my companies, and the guy's just not whoever he is out there. I'm going through a broker, and the price just keeps going up and up once he saw like our company and our other websites.
Right.
So that seems to be a challenge. But yeah, he's a great one. In Valuetainment, they put good content out there. So with yourself and your company, where's your vision in the next 5 or 10 years? If do you have where do you see yourself in 2 years? Like, what's the company looking to grow into? And, what is it going to look like by 2027, 2030, things like that?
I think the goal of the company long term is to get as many businesses as possible creating something like this in-house on their own. Because as I said at the very beginning, building a content engine, I think, is the easiest way to build an authentic, consistent content presence. And while I would like to be the person behind the camera doing that for everybody, that scale will run out in the next year or so. So I think it's going to become very important to build tools such that anybody can do it. Not anybody, but
Sure.
people with a little bit of prep can do it. It doesn't have to be a video podcast like this is. It can be simply a discipline they bring in-house to know that every single month we're going to film a people profile. We're going to build content around this particular practice area of our business. We're going to have a couple testimonials come in. We're going to go out into the community and film a day where we do charity work, whatever that is, to always have the different faces of the company featured in that consistent way. It is not a terribly high jump for a lot of these businesses to make, other than the fact that they don't have somebody full-time doing it right now.
Yeah.
So Authentic Avenue, in a way, will not only, of course, personally deliver on that, but help others literally pave that avenue for themselves. I think that is where the business has the most value to the most people. So that's professionally. Personally, I'd love to build a set like this for myself.
Yeah.
And interview those high status people. I did that hundreds of times over with mostly chief marketing officers. That's how I got into this game.
Yeah.
Was I built a podcast and I figured out how to get in touch with those CXOs. So I knew I could get in front of high status people and build compelling content that would keep people coming back. I'd like to do that again. I'd like to do it in a more mainstream sense, just because that seems to be where a lot of the attention is. And the game then becomes figuring out how to have a hook and a reason to return and all of these different shticks like I had talked about a second ago. So I think personally that would be a fun venture for me, and I don't know if it conflicts with what we're doing professionally to democratize this discipline for people, but that's the vision broadly.
And do you feel with helping other companies as well grow out their niche markets, because I think that's kind of what you said that you're looking at doing, and then growing out your own.
Yep.
Do you feel, other than certain niche markets or subject matters, do you feel that mainstream type of media reporting is going to start to gravitate towards this kind of setting with companies?
It's going to have to.
Just because I feel a lot of people have turned their back on just turning on Channel 3 or whatever, or
Right.
6. And I believe that people are going to, other than subject matters that are pulling them in, I personally feel that you're going to see news being reported. There could be a weatherman podcast. There probably already is somewhere out there.
There probably is.
But, something live that's, do you feel that those are companies that are going to start to try to pull from as well?
I do. And specifically, I think that's in the streaming world, but I'll get to that in a second. The reason why we're seeing those things today is that this access to a platform and an audience, but also to production quality, is rapidly democratizing. It takes a significant amount in budget at high levels, but most anybody can put on something which probably gets you like 50% of the way to what you might see on TV at 6 o'clock in the evening. So as soon as you do that and combine it with a niche of people who are most likely to consume your sort of content, people interested in the weather, people interested in drinking with executives, whatever it is, like that will ultimately have to conquer the channels 3 and channel 6s of old. That will only continue. And consumer behavior backs that up. The change from cable to streaming to, when I say streaming there, I mean like the Hulus and the Disney Pluses of the world, all the way down to watching something on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram Reels. The pieces are getting smaller and smaller. The production floor is rising, but the perceived production ceiling is also lowering a little bit. You don't have to have a $100,000 camera. It's nice, but you don't need it. Streaming in particular, and from here I'm talking about live streaming content wherever it is, for the last 10 to 15 years has largely been popularized in playing video games. And that is something that at the advent of that was seen as a little odd. But those creators have built extraordinary audiences who they connect with on an incredibly deep level, for whom they produce content incredibly consistently. There is no reason why that discipline should not extend into other industries of people with other talents. And you're seeing that a little bit on like Instagram and TikTok right now, and people streaming live. And it could be as simple as, and this is literally true, there's a guy who puts a smartphone on his robot mower and it mows the grass. Do you know how many thousands of viewers that guy gets? That guy doesn't even put his face on the camera.
So I watch a guy who goes and removes beehives.
There you go.
It's because it's you don't. When we were younger, would you ever think you could get literally a POV of inside a hornet's nest?
No.
It's crazy.
No, it's
but
crazy.
Yeah, or you said the video games. I mean, we're a far cry away from blowing into the cartridge of the Nintendo, and then having to go right and down.
Yeah.
To get that one click.
Exactly.
It's and I see guys do these live stream. You're right about the video games.
Yeah.
And they're videoing themselves play the video game.
Yep.
And I can't believe how many views that are currently watching.
Yeah. But in the last couple of years, though, the most subscribed to category of streaming, I think, I don't know for sure, but at least from what I'm perceiving, is a category that's just chatting. These are variety streamers who do a whole bunch of different things. Most of the time, they're just talking directly to their audience, or they're interviewing somebody left and right. Does it sound familiar? Well, it should, because it's talk radio and it's talk TV. These are the things which 30, 40 years ago you had limited options for that now anybody with a phone can put on. That production floor has risen. The access has been democratized. And I don't see any reason why that should slow down, especially because, as everybody building this content will soon realize, the most lucrative business that you can be in is a media business, is an advertising business, because everybody wants that audience and everybody wants that validation. So yeah, it's going to go that way. Will cable die? I doubt it. I mean, you're sooner to see competitors like free ad-supported television, which are compilations of YouTube videos with ad breaks in the middle, sooner be the competitor to television, and then live streaming from there. I'm excited. I'm thrilled to see where that goes. But like in business, that just hasn't really been cracked yet. Cheddar was like the first player to do it.
Yep.
But that will continue to expand. It just hasn't blown up like gaming has yet.
Interesting. Yeah. So one last question is, tell me, I guess, tell our audience, where can somebody find you? What if somebody needs, like, what if their needs are? How do they reach you? What's content or a value that they could utilize your services? Kind of tell our audience. We're also going to link all the information for Adam and his company and all of our videos and whatnot. But maybe one last piece here is tell our audience, where to find you, what you can quickly offer, and everything in between.
So you can find me on socials at Adam on Brand. And the website is authave.com, authave.com. Authentic Avenue is what it's called. The closest thing that I can provide you today, just clicking off, is probably just the way that I'm building the business, because I like to document a lot of that as publicly as possible. Beyond that, if you want to like book a meeting, call me up. That's great. I can tell you how I do a lot of this stuff and give you an idea of how to build the first gear, so to speak, of a content engine. And, if I end up being personally helpful, cool. But as I say, the mission of the business is ultimately, I think, going to be to teach as many people as possible how to build this sort of thing for themselves, such that anybody can do it. And so you're most likely to see that kind of content at first. But I'd love to get my hands dirty as much as I can.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll link everything up for our viewers. Adam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the episode today.
Thank you. True honor.
Absolutely. Take care.